Sustainable development targets three broad goals for society. We've seen that economic growth is within reach for all parts of the world, even those few places that have been stuck in poverty until the early 21st century. The second broad goal is to respect the planetary boundaries. That is to combine economic growth and the choice of technologies and behaviors and policies so that we don't trespass the Earth's boundaries and create terrible environmental crises of climate change or acidity of the oceans or loss of biodiversity. The third main goal of sustainable development is social inclusion. The idea that an economy should serve all of its people, that the benefits of economic growth should be widely shared, that everybody should have a chance at prosperity, at proper health care, education. And we know that that challenge is also an unfulfilled challenge in many parts of the world. Throughout history, many of the gains of an economy have been concentrated at the top. And throughout most of history, the gains of an economy have been highly concentrated in one half of humanity, the men, with women facing discrimination and an inability to participate equally and productively in society. Social inclusion, therefore, is like the challenge of ending poverty and the challenge of environmental sustainability, an unfinished goal, but one that is within reach. For us to make progress on social inclusion, we need to have a framework of values and ethics. We have to ask ourselves and analyze, in fact, what are the standards that should apply in terms of fairness in society? Why do we care? Why do most of us feel that when there are vast inequalities of income, or when there are people that have billions of dollars, and then there are people starving, something's not right with that scene? In order to understand that, we have to not only analyze the nature of inequality and social exclusion, but we have to think about the underlying values that give, at least for most of humanity and for the governments that have signed many charters and declarations, the motivation for social inclusion in the first place. When we think about the questions of inclusion, there are many dimensions of moral or ethical choice that we should face. One set of issues is about income and wealth inequality. There are, even within that category, many different issues. First, the question of the existence of extreme poverty in societies of plenty. The question of the huge gaps between the rich and the poor. And the question of social mobility, the chance for a poor child to be able to escape from the poverty of one's childhood and become a middle class or even rich person and household within the society. So the first category of ethical or value thinking we should look at is inequality from those various dimensions. A second related but not identical issue is the question of discrimination. Even our laws in most parts of the world continue to discriminate. And of course, in most of human history, the legal framework of the state allowed for slavery, allowed for complete discrimination against women's rights to hold property or to inherit property. In other words, the law itself built in discrimination. And so a second dimension of our ethical or value thinking should face the question, what do we mean, what should we mean by equality before the law, by equal protection of the laws, by the role of a state that respects civil and political rights? A third aspect of our values is about cultural norms. Sometimes things are not strictly illegal, but the attitudes in society, discrimination against minority groups, not hiring particular kinds of people, particular races, ethnicities, people from different parts of society, is often a cultural attitude, sometimes backed up by the force of the state, but sometimes prolonged mainly by our cultural and social views. What should be done about that? How should we think about the relationship of morality or ethics and culture? So there are many different aspects of values and value systems that we really should explore when we investigate first and then promote the concept of social inclusion. Of course, throughout human history and human thinking, there have been many schools of thought about these questions. It's important for us to understand some of those schools of thought. and it has a lot of interest, and that is the philosophy called utilitarianism. This is a philosophy that was propounded first by a political activist and philosopher named Jeremy Bentham at the end of the 18th century. He said that the goal of society is happiness, and the goal of an ethical system and a moral philosophy and politics should be the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. And so Jeremy Bentham said that society should maximize its utility, the word that he used as a term to mean, in essence, happiness of the people. Now, utilitarianism gives many different motivations for social inclusion, and I'll look to those shortly. A fourth philosophy that arose also in the Western world in the 19th century, with strong roots in England first, and then especially strong political roots in the right wing, I could say, of the U.S. political spectrum, is a philosophical idea called libertarianism. Libertarianism is a little bit different from utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is the greatest good for the greatest number. Libertarianism, in shorthand, is a philosophy that says, leave me alone. I don't want the state, the government imposing on me. I don't want others imposing on me. I have my rights to liberty. That's the preeminent right in that philosophy. And don't interfere. So libertarianism is an extreme free market or laissez-faire philosophy. Leave me alone. You can see that it has its attraction in the context of authoritarian or totalitarian government, because the main doctrine of libertarianism is liberty. And when liberty is being wholly violated, that's a denial of basic rights, and it becomes a very powerful doctrine. But libertarianism goes farther in some ways in our society to what many, including myself, regard as an extreme conclusion. It says that it's not even right to say that a rich man should give a small part of his wealth to a poor and starving person, because it's his liberty to do what he wants. And so libertarianism tends to oppose the use of taxes, for example, to redistribute income in society. A fifth philosophy, very much part of our international culture in the 20th century and now 21st century, is a human rights philosophy. This is yet another approach to the question of social inclusion. The human rights approach, which one can see has its roots in some of the religious traditions as well, says that every human being on the planet has basic human rights, political rights, civil rights as a citizen, but also economic, social, and cultural rights. So 5 categories of rights. And the idea is that because a person is a human being a human being is enough to say that human being has rights, including the right to a decent life, the right to be able to meet basic needs in society, the right to call on society to ensure that those basic needs are fulfilled. You see the difference, for example, with the libertarian idea. The libertarian idea says government has no right to impose on any citizen, even a rich citizen. Government's only right is to create a framework of law and order and security, not to redistribute income or property, for example, for the benefit of the poor. Whereas the human rights approach says, no, a poor person has rights, some basic rights to health, to education, to means of livelihood, and society must be organized, including, for example, through taxation, to help meet those basic needs. This, I think, helps us to see, in thinking about those 5 different dimensions, and of course one could mention others, that throughout human history we've thought about these ethical issues in quite different ways. The great sages thought about us having the responsibility to be virtuous in our behavior. The religions about our responsibility to others according to the golden rule. Utilitarianism to our responsibility as a society or a collectivity to maximize happiness within the society. Libertarianism emphasizing the dangers of an overreach of government, and human rights as part and parcel of the global legal environment as defining basic standards that should apply to every human being on the planet, no matter what kind of political social system he or she lives in. I want to pursue this issue of the human rights because it is our dominant framework. It's the one that the member states of the United Nations have signed on to. It says that we should meet the basic needs of everybody on the planet, at least progressively meet them. If we're not able to because of technology or other limitations, there should be what is called a progressive realization of those rights. In other words, we should strive to end extreme poverty. Even if we can't do that all at once, we should strive to ensure that everybody has access to education. We should strive to ensure that everybody has access to decent health care. Economists sometimes give a name to some of the targets of those basic needs, calling them merit goods. Education and health are merit goods in the language of economists because everybody in society merits them. They merit them in the human rights approach simply by virtue of being human beings. They may merit them in an economist's broader approach by saying that society benefits by ensuring that everybody has that kind of access or coverage. Let me give you an example. Adam Smith, who we mostly think of as a free market economist, said that education is a merit good. Now, the human rights community would say, right on, it's the right of people to have education. But Adam Smith said it's also a good idea for society because it will produce better outcomes, not only meeting the rights of individuals, but produce more social stability. Let me just quote what Adam Smith said in 1776. He said the state, meaning the government and the society, derives no inconsiderable advantage from the people's instruction, in other words, education. The more they are instructed, the less liable they are to the delusions of enthusiasm and superstition. So he's saying by educating the population, society is safer. It doesn't go off in crazy ideas of superstition or other kinds of delusions. And Adam Smith went on to say that the expense of the institutions for education and religious instruction is likewise no doubt beneficial to the whole society, and may therefore, without injustice, be defrayed by the general contribution of society. He's saying that since education is a merit good, society should pay for it. In other words, public education. We have tended to view healthcare in the same way. It's a merit good, partly because individuals have a basic right to health, but also because helping people to remain healthy helps other people too. We don't want to say, oh, it doesn't matter whether those people are vaccinated or not, because when a significant part of a population does not have a basic vaccine, then an epidemic disease can spread through the community and endanger everybody. And so health is a merit good in the individual sense of a right, but also in the sense of providing a broad benefit to society. One could say, therefore, that the focus on basic needs, especially health and education, can be viewed as a human right according to the human rights approach, or it could be viewed as a wise and useful kind of policy, a bit like the utilitarian idea of producing the greatest good for the greatest number. I want to underscore the role of ethics and values and the need for us to have more discussion, more public awareness, more debate about these underlying ethical choices, because sustainable development as a set of goals depends on ethics. It depends on how we view the right thing to do. We have thousands of years of deep human thinking on this. We can draw upon it. We can draw upon these different facets and approaches. And I believe we need to help mold a global ethic for the 21st century.